energy and dietary fiber. Help yourself to bodybuilding nutrients.
Make wheat a part of your life.
Bring nutrition to your table.
Serve old home bread.
This is WHO TV 13 Des Moines.
Good morning. NBC News has a copy of the Senate Intelligence Committee report on the Iran-Contra case, a draft report which was not adopted and until last night was secret. The main feature? That in January of 1986, President Reagan approved an arms shipment to Iran with the understanding that it would lead to the release of all the American hostages held by Shiite Muslims in Lebanon. At the White House this morning, that must be causing some problems since the president has always claimed it wasn't an arms for hostages deal. That's the bad news. The good news for the White House is that according to the report, the president did not know anything about using profits from the arms sales to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. That Iran-Contra report is making some shocking headlines today, Friday, January the 9th, 1987.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant, Gumbel, and Jane Pauley.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a Friday morning, heading towards a weekend. That bombshell has been released in Washington. John Palmer is going to give us a little bit more on that NBC News exclusive, that Senate committee report for the news desk in just a little bit. And then following news and, of course, a check of the weather, we're going to talk about the airlines. We're just coming off one of the busier holiday travel seasons, and experts are saying there have been more complaints this time around than ever before. We're going to take a look at how the passengers rated the service of domestic airlines and check a best to worst list in just about 9 minutes. Jay?
Also coming up, more of Gloria Steinem's interview with Dolly Parton. We'll see what Robert Young is up to at age 79. And on After 8, we'll see why some people think American teenagers are working too hard.
And at 7:15, we'll talk to two representatives of some unsigned baseball free agents who are ready to take on the owners amid suspicions of collusion and price fixing. That's to come. Let's get to the news desk now. John Palmer. Good morning, John.
Brian, Jane, good morning. First, more on that Senate Intelligence Committee draft report obtained by NBC News, which indicates that President Reagan approved the shipment of arms to Iran as part of a direct exchange for the release of all American hostages in Lebanon. John Dancy standing by in Washington this morning with more on that. John?
Morning, John. The report made available to NBC News indicates that the U.S. considered it an arms for hostages deal at least as early as last January, and that CIA Director William Casey knew money may have been transferred to the Nicaraguan Contras more than a month before he said.
On January 17th, when the president signed a document called a finding okaying the shipment, part of the accompanying documentation said, if all the hostages are not released after the first shipment of 1,000 weapons, further transfers would cease. The administration has maintained that the shipment of arms was never an arms for hostages deal. The document also says CIA Director Casey was first informed of the possibility that some of the Iran arms money had been diverted to the Contras as early as October 23rd. New York oil man Roy Furmark, who acted as a middleman in the deal, told two of Casey's aides specifically that money was being diverted to the Contras in Central America, according to the report. The report also says Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North wrote a memo on April 4th last year detailing a plan to divert money from the sale to the Contras.
But the report does not find hard evidence that money was ever actually diverted. Still, the report estimates that some $10.5 million from the shipments are still missing. John?
John, again, what does the report say about what President Reagan might have known or did not know about the diversion of the money to the Nicaraguan Contras?
John, it is very silent on that fact and says only that the president, when told of this by Attorney General Meese and Chief of Staff Regan, seemed surprised. That's all it has to say.
Thanks, John. Andrea Mitchell is standing by now at the White House. Andrea, why was the White House pushing so hard to have this report made public?
Well, the amazing thing, John, is that the White House did want this report out precisely because it seems to indicate, at least without the key testimony of Poindexter and North, it indicates no direct link that the president knew about the diversion of funds to the Contras. That shows how desperate, and really the White House is for a defense of the president, that it would want this report out, even though without being conclusive, it seems to clear the president of any Contra connection, because at the same time, the report is really a devastating indictment or chronicle of how this administration conducts foreign policy. It shows that people lied to each other, that Schultz was told by both Regan and Poindexter last April, when Schultz had heard some rumors about the Iran deal, that there was nothing to it. It shows that the president last January 7th conducted a National Security Council meeting with all of his top advisors, discussed the issue, didn't mention to Schultz and Weinberger, who opposed the deal, that he had signed that secret order on January 6th, the day before. It also shows that Schultz, when the story first broke on Election Day in the Middle East, pleaded with Poindexter to tell all of the details, saying that that was the only way the president could be helped, that Poindexter wrote back to Schultz that he would not, that his best guidance was that they should remain closed-mouthed, and he said that Weinberger, Bush, and Poindexter said that Weinberger and Bush both agreed with him on that point.
And Andrea, there must be further concern about the reports of increased CIA involvement in all this.
Well, the CIA was clearly up to its eyebrows in this from the very beginning, although it describes it as an NSC operation. It did all of the logistical support and wrote the key legal justifications, that secret finding that the president signed. Also, it shows that the man now running the agency, Robert Gates, was told about the Contra diversion on October 1st, weeks and weeks before it first was at least reportedly told to Ed Meese, and said nothing about it when testifying to a Senate committee.
Thanks, Andrea. In other news this morning, searchers near Pollexville, North Carolina, found the body of a 3-month-old girl in the wreckage of an air ambulance that crashed in heavy brush last night, killing 3 other people aboard. The child, suffering from seizures, was being transported from one hospital to another. And in Brawley, California, a Marine Corps heavy transport helicopter with 5 crew members aboard crashed. The 5 officially listed now as missing. A lot of attention is focused on Wall Street this morning, where the stock market has posted gains totaling more than 100 points during the past 5 trading sessions, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average surging over the 2,000 mark on Thursday for the first time in history. Our chief business correspondent, Mike Jensen, is here this morning with more on the market situation. Good morning.
Good morning, John. The thing to remember is that this surge in the market is not the result of a booming economy or even the expectation of a booming economy. On the contrary, the economy is going to be quite sluggish this year, at least for the first half of the year. Then it may pick up a little bit. So what is it a result of? Mainly the fact that there was a lot of cash around. The big institutions, the banks, the money market funds, had sold many stocks before the end of 1986 to take advantage of the old tax law, which was more liberal. They had that cash available, so they had to buy stocks. Now, the big question, will this continue? Most of the experts on Wall Street think it will not continue to surge in a very strong fashion. The big bull market that has existed since 1982 has been the result largely of declining interest rates. Those interest rates have pretty much bottomed out now. They probably will not go down much more this year, maybe a little, but not very much. The second thing is corporate earnings will probably not be terribly strong this year. So, bottom line, the stock market is expected to do somewhat better this year, but not a lot better. And just one final word, the stock market moves in spurts, both up and down. The next spurt could very well be down. That could happen within weeks or maybe even days. John?
Thanks, Mike. Well, that bitter cold spell continues over much of Europe this morning, with temperatures of more than 30 degrees below zero in some areas. In Stockholm, where it was 4 degrees below this morning, a private security guard patrolling outside the Soviet embassy was wearing a fur cap, 2 hoods, 5 sweaters, 2 coats, 2 pairs of mittens, 2 pairs of wool socks, long johns, and 2 pairs of trousers, we are told. 8 minutes now after the hour. Again, Bryant.
But who was counting? Thanks, John. Busy morning. Leonard Scott's getting a head start in his weekend. Unusual, I know. But
Right.
Joe Witte is...
If this is Friday, I'm here. And
Joe Witte has joined us. How are you?
Good morning. Good. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. For all you folks who want to try out your snowblower that Santa may have brought you in the midsection of the country, you'll have a chance in St. Louis. Possibly 4 to 8 inches there. Chicago, 2 to 5 inches there. And for your air travelers, expect some weather delays in that section of the country. The morning radar shows that snow and rain south of that system in the center portion of the country. The east and the west looks pretty good shape. A few scattered clouds here and there, but that's about all. Now, where did this low come from? Came from the southwest. This is the same storm that gave all that snow to the Rocky Mountains, which they needed desperately. It is now curving up over Texas. By midday, will be over Missouri, headed towards the Great Lakes. So again, expect some slow travel in this section of the country from Chicago back through St. Louis. Wichita has 5 inches of fresh snow on the ground. South of this, there'll be an area of very icy conditions on the highways, and south of this, just plain old rain, some of that on the hefty side. Again, the west and the east in great shape. That's the national weather. Now here's what's happening in your part of the world.
In our world today, winter returns with cloudy skies and light snow developing. High temperatures here in Des Moines of 31 degrees. With your morning weather, I'm meteorologist Tom Atkins.
And please drive with care where the new snow is falling. Coming up in the next half hour, some news on the El Nino over the Pacific and what it's going to do to affect our weather. And now, here's Jane Pauley.
And on Close-Up this morning, the frustrations are flying. Thanks to deregulation of the airline industry, which began in 1978, airfares are down, passenger numbers are up, more flights are taking off, but all that has brought on more confusion at the airports, and many flyers are just plain unhappy about it. James Burnley hears a lot of complaints. He is the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, and he is in our Washington newsroom this morning. And good morning.
Good morning to you.
I hear that complaints to your office are up 30% this year. What's wrong?
Well, Jane, what's wrong is that there was some very sensationalized and irresponsible journalism yesterday. In fact, we had 1,600 additional complaints last year over 1985 when 36 million more Americans flew. To put it another way, that's a 14% increase in complaints, not 30%, and a 10% increase in passengers.
Well, you're counting complaints. If you counted delays, would you understand the perception that there seems to be a big increase in grousing about the system these days?
Well, again, our numbers simply don't show that. We did have a 30% increase in complaints and requests for information added together, but the increase in requests for information were very much higher. You're exactly right, though. 1986 was not a good year when you look at delays. It was an outstanding year when you look at safety, not a single fatality on a major U.S. carrier. But on the delay front, as we saw at Christmas, we had terrible weather. We had tremendous delays throughout the system, and as your weather report just showed, we're likely to have some delays today. There are a number of things, though, that we can do about that, even though 70% of the delays are driven by weather. The other 30% we can work on.
A minute, and I want to get to hopeful solutions, but the weather isn't worse than it ever used to be. So why suddenly does weather impact airline traffic in ways that it didn't some years ago?
No, I didn't say it was worse than it ever used to be. The weather was worse across the country on average, particularly last summer, as compared to 1985. And as a result, when you compare 86 to 85, you do have additional delays. We also do have more traffic, and we are looking at a number of steps that we can take to improve both how we handle traffic. In fact, we've got a team working right now that's going to particular airports where we've got delay problems. And the first airport they hit, San Francisco, we were able to achieve a 50% reduction in the average delays at San Francisco at peak hours. So we think there are a lot of steps we can take. Well, it's a matter of going in and looking at exactly how the traffic is handled and looking at the systems that we use for aircraft to approach the airport and take off, and simply making sure that we're as efficient as possible. There are some problems, however, that we cannot solve by ourselves. Again, 70% of it, year in and year out, is on average going to be weather-related, but the airlines have got a lot of things they can do as well. And Piedmont Airline, by way of example, just achieved a dramatic reduction in delays in the last couple of months simply by being more realistic in their scheduling practices. But at Dallas-Fort Worth right now, during one 10-minute period, we've got an airline that's scheduling 45 airplanes to land and take off. Now, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen, and we've got to see more aggressive action by the airlines in conjunction with the steps we're taking to be more realistic in their scheduling practices.
If I called your office with a complaint or with an inquiry, and specifically a number of people will call you and ask you which airline is the best, and I know you don't answer that kind of question, but why is it that some airlines do have a better job in spite of the traffic, in spite of the weather? Some airlines seem to do better than others.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, and in fact, overall, we've got just 2.26 complaints coming into us per 100,000 passengers, but individual airlines tend to be either above or below that number. And it's a marketing question as much as anything else. Those airlines that want repeat business, the airlines that want passengers to feel good about them, are the airlines that we have the lower complaint rates on.
Is it in part a matter of we get what we pay for, it costs less to fly now, is somewhat less convenience going to be the price we pay?
Well, that can be the case with some airlines. We have had examples, People's Express being the most notable, where by advertising and deliberate marketing strategy, they told you that the services were going to be somewhat reduced. But no, there are, I think today, a great many airlines that are still trying to get business, not just by pricing, certainly they're doing that, but also by making service as attractive as they can.
All right, well, we thank you for joining us this morning, Ms. Burnley. And coming up in a moment, change of subject, baseball's free agency. Are the baseball owners conspiring to kill it? We'll find out. This is Today on NBC.
Free family vacation in Florida or California now from Logier's Clark. That's right. Now when you buy a high-efficiency Lennox furnace air conditioning system from Logier's, you get 4 days and 3 nights for a family of 4 at Disney centers in Florida or California. Have a free family vacation now. Save hundreds on fuel dollars with your new Lennox Pulse system. For details, call 288-2111. Logier's with the We Never Close service department plus 81 years experience. Call today, 288-2111.
If you've got 2 minutes, you can make